Article 6 of the United States Constitution states, "This Constitution and the law of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be supreme law of the land. Any provisions of the international treaty ratified by the United States becomes the law of the United States." B. The United States is a signatory to the United Nations Charter, a treaty among the nations of the world. Article 2, Section 4 of the United Nations Charter states, "All members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. Threat of force is illegal." C. Article 51 lays out the only exception. Nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. Iran has not attacked the United States, therefore any threat against Iran by the United States is illegal. The Vice President's deception upon the citizens in Congress of the United States that enabled the failed United States invasion of Iraq forcibly altered the rules of diplomacy such that the Vice President's recent belligerent actions towards Iran are destabilizing and counterproductive to the national security of the United States. In all of this, Vice President Richard B. Cheney has acted in a manner contrary to his trust as Vice President and subversive of constitutional government, to the prejudice of the cause of law and justice and the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, Richard B. Cheney, by such conduct, warrants an impeachment and trial and removal from office.
The resolution qualifies. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the resolution be laid on the table.
The question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
On that, I ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman ask for the ayes and nays?
I ask for the ayes and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion to table will be followed by 5-minute votes on motion to suspend the rules with regards to H.R.E.S. Resolution 162, by the yeas and nays, H.R. 3997 by the yeas and nays, and H.R. 3495 by the yeas and nays.
Vice President Cheney wasn't on anybody's agenda when the day started here in the House, but it is now. It is a question of privilege, a privilege motion brought up by Dennis Kucinich, representative from Ohio. And this is actually a vote here on a motion to table that resolution. A privilege question, a privilege resolution can be called up for floor debate ahead of other matters. He actually called up this resolution earlier in the day, about midday, and read the impeachment resolution as proposed. And you just heard it read again by the reading clerk. So here, Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, making a motion to table that resolution, and thus we have a 15-minute vote. It looks like the first of a series of 4. In reporting on this particular resolution, the Baltimore Sun's Matthew Hay Brown wrote a short while ago, "It now looks as Representative Dennis Kucinich's efforts to impeach Vice President Dick Cheney will finally come to a vote today, but not the vote for which supporters have been hoping." The Sun article continues, with Democrats averse to opening an intramural debate on an issue that divides their base, party leaders are expected to nip the measure in the bud this afternoon. Majority Leader Steny Hoyer told reporters this morning that he would move to table the measure when Kucinich introduces it. And you just heard the Majority Leader making the motion to table that resolution. So that's this 15-minute vote, a couple of suspension bills, but the main agenda today has been, or will be, an override vote coming up of a water resources bill that the president vetoed last last week. And following this series of votes, we expect an hour debate on for being with us.
Thank you.
We talked to Sabrina Eaton from your town paper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and asked her why now. So we'll go right to the source, Representative Kucinich. Why is this coming up today?
There have been meetings all over this country where people are demanding to know what Congress is going to do about this administration's latest expression of aggressive intent, this time against Iran. And we're on the threshold of another war. And there's a question of what's Congress doing. This vice president, who led us into a war based on lies against Iraq, is doing the same thing with respect to Iran. I put this resolution before the Congress more than 6 months ago, and it's time for the American people to know who's on the side of the Constitution. And so that's why I brought this resolution forward today.
You began the work on this back in April and had some 21 sponsors of the resolution, if I do my math right, and it looks like most of them were Democratic, yet here on the House floor, looking at the vote, you're getting some Republican support. Are you surprised by that?
This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. The American people want to know that their Constitution is going to be protected. And the Constitution has been under attack by this administration. And this is about the rule of law. And this is a moment for Congress to show that the system of checks and balances, which is an inherent part of our system of governance, is going to be expressed here through this resolution of impeachment. I mean, after all, the founders put Article 2, Section 4 in the Constitution specifically to restrain administrative abuse of the war power. And so my movement on this today is keeping the faith with millions of Americans who are demanding that Congress do something, stand up, and challenge this administration's efforts to take us into still another war.
You have talked about a lot of these points on the campaign trail, so tell us what you hope the impact of this vote or this resolution will be on your campaign.
Well, this isn't about my campaign. I'm standing here for the Constitution. This is about whether someone is going to be the voice of the American people to say that our Constitution is so vital to maintaining our democratic system of governance. Now, I will tell you this, that within the next week, there will be a national town hall meeting at which people all over the country will have the opportunity to participate on this issue of impeachment. This is a growing movement to defend the Constitution, and this isn't about personalities. It's not about me. It's even not so much about Dick Cheney as it is. Do we believe that our Constitution requires that those who are chief executives adhere to the law, tell the truth, not put us in jeopardy or threaten our national security by taking us into war based on lies?
Where's this
that's really what it's about.
Where's this national town hall meeting going to take place?
It's going to take place on either on the internet, by telephone, or both. It's being set up right now. We'll keep you posted. I've got to go back to the floor. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Representative Kucinich. Representative Dennis Kucinich joining us from the Capitol, talking about his motion to his resolution of impeachment on Vice President Cheney. It was a privilege resolution. A privilege resolution, a privilege question can be brought to the floor for immediate debate, and it was brought at least to the floor to be read, and that resolution a motion was made to table it, and that's what this vote on is here. We have about 40 votes remaining on the House floor. This is a 15-minute vote, the first of looks like a series of 4.